Good. Okay. Switch.
Important?
Important podcast. It's not important. Okay. Let me think. Let me say what I think about it. I find it experimental, or maybe I call it experimental so that I can give myself the permission. I can actually make it, stay in it. I think I fear if I take it a bit too seriously, maybe I'll start tinkering with the technical elements, the setting, not having the studio, not having the speakers, the mics and everything, and also having just one camera recording the whole thing.
Yeah.
I will start obsessing about that, and I will try to maybe improve that. So that's why I have to call it an experimental podcast. Yeah. So we did one another. I was not happy with it. I was happy with the voice, with the sound, but I was not happy with the camera. What do you feel about it, and what do you think? Where is it going? Like, what are your thoughts, emotions, whatever, about the whole thing?
Well, I like this genre of interviewing or video making because you have freedom. You can beat about the bush. Take a detour and then come back. And another thing is that it's not so condensed as the reviews that you have made about the books and everything. So yeah, it's interesting, and we happen to talk about a lot of covering a good deal of area.
I
That's
see.
interesting.
I see. Yeah. So again, it often happens when I approach things, my perspective happens to be a bit judgmental and emotional. I notice it. In your case, it happens to be neutral, even rational. It's like there are not a lot of emotions involved, and I find that quite fascinating. When I see that. Yeah, I find
I
that.
don't see the difference.
No.
I'm not.
Yeah. No, for example, if anybody rewatches the way I expressed it, the way I talked about the podcast, you can see the emotions that I feel about this process. In your case, it's more mature, let's say. And it's a weird thing that you are the youngest brother and I'm the eldest, but somehow it works. Yeah, it works. Yeah, and that we have already discussed the topics that we are going to talk about, but I will take this as an opportunity to actually address one of the questions that we were going to talk about anyway, and that is self-regulation. You didn't have any idea about self-regulation. I read about it, I found about it, I analyzed myself in relationship to that idea. And then one day you asked me something, and I wrote you a very long email expressing.
Actually, I had fallen from a bike, and then I was feeling sad. I wanted to watch salacious videos, just waste my time, and that's where I sent you an email discussing the whole thing. You told me about self-regulation there.
Yeah, and I had read about self-regulation, and then I used it as an encapsulating concept to explain all sorts of human behavior. And I told you that, I read about it, but I think it explains a lot that, people engage in all sorts of behavior in order to regulate themselves, There are ways that people use in order to regulate themselves from within, and then there are things in which there are things that people do on the outside in order to regulate their lives, structure their lives, their relationships, and their work. And I think that most of the psychological problems that people go to therapy for, they are related to self-regulation. Maybe they are unable to control some of their emotions. Maybe they are unable to do the work that they want to do. All sorts of stuff. But before going into the technical elements and the psychological analysis that I will provide you with, first let's talk about your process. Like, just talk about your daily schedule. How do you go about it? And like, how does it work?
Yeah, across years, I have like my friends and especially you, you have mentioned this thing that my life is very regulated. So it's not like I consciously, uh, handle things, but maybe since childhood, I have a certain pattern of going about my day, certain things to do, certain things to avoid, so maybe it has become a habit with me, and I don't, and when you sent me the email, I could see that, a person who tries more to regulate himself is the sign of his being abnormal, like the more you try with it, the more uncontrollable it is, or the more difficult it is, the more problematic you are, like the more, psychological issues that you have. So nowadays I don't have any problem with it, the day just goes by and I don't even feel it. But it comes in a week or two, in an episode where I have to actually try to regulate myself.
Yeah, so I'll refine your statement that the more effort people, the more willpower people put into regulating their lives. You said that there are greater chances that they have psychological issues. I wouldn't call it abnormal, and also I wouldn't make a general statement about it because it might sound biased and also a bit judgmental.
Yeah.
But I do understand that like in your case, the way I have noticed you and a few of my friends that you know about,
Yeah.
that with them I have seen that the way they regulate their daily lives, they do it with a lot more efficiency, but also they don't have to make a conscious effort. Like they don't have to consciously decide everything. It happens a bit. It's like flowing water. They transition from one thing to another. They don't have difficulty in being elastic.
Yeah.
Sometimes the routine might not work the way they had imagined it to be or the way they wanted it to be, but still they can come around and do their thing. But if you are someone that you want to, like I remember when I was in my intermediate, I wanted my day to work perfectly well. I wanted my day to work out perfectly well. And so, for example, I would start studying in the morning, and if let's say I wasted 30 minutes or an hour, I would ruin the whole day because I was like, oh, it's not going to work. But with someone like you, even if you waste 2 hours, still a good deal of the day is left. You can still, do a lot of good work or maybe talk to your friends or talk to your family. So you don't have any issue with that. You are not trying to make it perfect. You're not trying to make it work perfectly well. And the most important thing is that whenever I have asked you to explain it to me, you only tell me the consequences, the results, and that's why I tell you that, for example, one of our mutual friends, he has been going through a lot of issues. And what you used to try with him was that, you used to give him like advice that, okay, here are the 10 things that I don't do, but you do. What if you stop doing these 10 things and instead focus on 7 or 10 of these other things? Your mental health will get better. And I told you that no, that's not how it works. The reason that you are able to do all those 10 things right almost every day, that's a consequence of good health and a good self-regulation system. But it has grown across a long period of time. You cannot just tell someone with personal issues that, oh, just start doing the good things and your life will change. I wish it worked that way. I tried it with myself, and I think many people have tried, but it doesn't work that way.
Yeah, across these 2-3 years that we have been really communicating as brothers, I
brothers.
Yeah.
I mean that's okay. I'm joking.
So we, like I didn't know much about myself, but across years somehow you try to help me see myself. Like there are qualities that I have that I don't see in my daily life, but when you mention them, I'm like, oh, I have that. That's good, So self-regulation is one of the things. I can regulate myself in my daily life, but I don't know about the technicalities and how I do it. And that's the thing. And it's very difficult. I think. Like I remember 3 years ago when you were in Lahore with me. I was in the beginning of my intermediates. You used to try so much to regulate yourself, to work on the novel, to work on your friendship, to work on your relation with the family, but it just didn't work, you know. Like there would be days when you would not work at all, just watch YouTube or social media. So like I see that you have the elements of commitment, determination, you know, willpower. But when it comes to self-regulation, even you fail at it. So
Do I
and
still?
I would ask you. No, you are growing better at it. I would ask you the question, as you know much about psychology. How do you see it? Like, why cannot you regulate yourself and I can?
Okay.
And we have been a part of the same family, you know. There have been differences in the story. So what's the cause behind your irregulation and my regulation?
Well, you by asking this question, you are entering the most notorious,
Part
you
of
know,
the
part
family
of
history.
part of my life and part of the conversations that I have had with you and some other people too. I will not go into the, you know, into the you know, the dirty areas of that trauma that I talk about, but just about the thing that, you know, I was the first child, so I had to adapt to the needs and demands and expectations and even fears and anxieties and depression of my parents. By the time you came around, you know, there was a good deal of bolster work that stunted the intensity of things.
The
So
shock was lessened.
the shock was lessened, so you had a better chance to regulate yourself. You know, like your boundaries with our parents were not diffused in a way that, for example, your boundaries with our parents were not as diffused as in my case. I spent so many years just doing what they asked me to do that when finally the time came when I went to Cadet College and later when I went to Lahore, I just couldn't regulate. And the thing was because, you know, if you spend like 15, 18 years of your life just listening to what your parents said, I was the most obedient. Like, you know, people gave my examples in the village that, you know, he's the most innocent and compliant guy. And that was not, yeah, and that was not a healthy thing, you know. So because I listened too much to them and I obeyed them, I never learned to actually listen to myself. I never learned that, you know, how to control my impulses, you know. For example, you want something, you can choose to delay that. You can frustrate yourself to a certain extent. So like, for example, I could see 3 years ago that, you know, the kind of frustration limits that you had, I didn't have that, you know. The way you could move from one work to another, from meal to gossip to study to writing poetry, I couldn't do that. If I was writing poetry any day, I was just.
And the way I ask for my needs, you know, if I need something, I just say it, you know.
Yeah, of course, you know, we will talk about all of this stuff, you know, in future too, because, you know, there's just a whole umbrella of issues, well, a whole garden of issues that are connected to this. But just the one main thing is that, you know, the reason that you could regulate so easily and it turned into a habit, into like it allowed you to become so flexible was that you didn't have to adapt to the needs.
Even my body does not allow the irregulation. You know, if I, for example, if I feel good in the morning and then I think, you know, like an idea pops up in my mind which will somehow irregulate me, my body does not allow it. You know, the doubts, the regrets, all of these, you know, just come up and I cannot do it. You know?
Yeah, in my case, you know, because I lived in the darkness for such a long time, that there came a time where none of this mattered because I just couldn't, because the amount of negative and dysfunctional emotions that I had that were repressed and that were just boiling or on top of me, I just didn't know what to do with it. You know, there was just no structure inside me. There was no, you know, like so many things. You could say that so many things were broken inside me.
Yeah.
That there was just no way to deal with any. It's like, for example, I think that the human mind is a very good tool in the sense that it filters out what comes inside.
Yeah.
With some people, it filters out things in a very creative, productive, and efficient manner, whether it's related to relationships or whether it's relationship to work. But in some people, it filters out things in a very chaotic manner, and you know, it's like sometimes they would be very sensitive, sometimes they will be just cold like a rock, like a slab of ice. Sometimes they will exaggerate things, sometimes they will undermine things, and it's like the filter, the reality filter, is not processing things properly. So that was my case, maybe 2 3 years ago, and even a year ago. But it has gotten better now in the sense that I have more stability now, and I don't get overwhelmed so easily. But coming back to the psychological aspect of it, so the thing is that all of us regulate ourselves and our environment all the time. The way we relate to our families, to our friends, to our relationships, to our spouse, husband, wife, all sorts of relationships. We regulate ourselves in relationship to them, and then we regulate ourselves. For example, our eating habits. That if we do exercise or not, how long do we sleep? What are the times when we want to sleep? All
And
of these.
sometimes we want to do destructive things to regulate ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, just ask any smoker that, could you just have a normal day without smoking anything? They would not be able to do it because, it's like they needed to, to address some part of themselves that needs that, smoking for them to function, normally, like, normally with word. Yeah. And the same goes with, like people who drink coffee, too much coffee, like, and then maybe these are just habits, like when you consume stuff like smoking or coffee. Even more than that, people have, like, regulating their personal relationships, right? People. It's a controversial idea that people can look for patrons in relationships. Like, I don't have any evidence for it, so I wouldn't really stress on it. But it's like people can engage in repetitive behaviors. For example, sometimes people might try to rescue others, even though they have felt before, they might indulge in it. And sometimes, like, for example, I used to notice this thing in myself that I couldn't ask for my personal needs directly. So the strategy that I developed because of my childhood and the whole thing was that I would try to fulfill the needs of others, help them, rescue them, be their savior, yeah, get their attention, so that they would do the same thing for me. But it's like that's how children behave, that because they cannot eat themselves, they cannot clean themselves, they expect somebody else to do for them. Like, I'm supposed to do that, upstairs for myself. Like, if I need something, if I need somebody's company, I could just ask for it. So yeah, so you get an idea of self-regulation, that whatever we do, whatever habits we have, we are regulating ourselves. And sometimes, yes, they can be very destructive, and the healthier a person is, they can be very creative, efficient. And sometimes, like, people regulate very well in their work but cannot do the same in their relationships, and vice versa. Yeah. But earlier you mentioned, social media. So I'll move the sub. If you have anything to say about this, you can say. But we can move from self-regulation into the use of social media. I have been using social media for 10 years. I have deleted many accounts. I have given up it for 3 or 4 years, in small breaks. Right now I use it, and I have been using my present accounts for almost a year. And I think now I have settled, like, I know my comfortable space in the social media world. And actually, with starting a YouTube channel and everything, I'm even taking risk. Opposed to that, in your case, just speak for yourself, like, how did you find it?
It's like a revelation. I just get to see it clearly now. Like, for years, from the past 3 4 years that I have been using a mobile, I would not have, like, I would not take my days off without using them, just as you do, which is a reaction. But in my case, I just don't use it. There are apps like Instagram, Facebook. I have these accounts, but I don't use them. I just go there once a week or once in a month, even, just to see if I have gotten any message, or just to, like, there are days when you don't feel well, so you just go through the apps to see if there's something important or interesting is there. So
what happens to you when you use it, let's say, for
yeah,
1 hour or 2 hours?
The same thing. I just become irregular. I just cannot do the work that I have planned to do. For example, if I'm working on a short story, and, like, let's say I have planned to write 200 words in the morning. So in the morning, if I wake up and start, scribbling through the scrolling through the the Facebook, after 30 minutes I would just feel lost. Like I would lose the loop that I have with reality. Just I just lose it there.
Imagine using it for 3 hours. I have done it. I have used it. I have used mobile consistently, like even for 10 hours. But I can see that it just. I would not use it right now for 10 hours. I don't use it that much. I do get now and then conscious that I might have received a message. When I post something, I become curious. What somebody is saying about it. I know internally. I think I remind myself again and again that like with friends, when there's a personal conversation going on, that matters. But otherwise, you know, I keep working on moderating myself. But when I compare it with how you deal with it, I think I'm still abusing social media because you work a lot more, you read a lot more, and also it's like your system works more efficiently. You just don't go there a lot. And if you have personal needs, for example, talking to a friend, getting support or some comfort from a company of the people that you care about, you just get it from real people. You don't have to go to the social media in order to get that. I think to a certain extent because my friends are spread all over the place, and so. But even without, I think that I want the same things like I think fulfilling personal needs. Getting some comfort, getting some company, sharing stuff, listening to stuff, talking to people. But I do it through social media. I think there are probably there are narcissistic elements to the way I use it, but they are not so overwhelming that I would start.
I'm even strict in regarding that. Like cinema, I love cinema. I love watching good movies. But even when I watch a movie, or let's say I watch half of the movie, when I come out of the room, I just feel lost. I cannot talk to people properly. I cannot, like the same thing, I cannot regulate my emotions. So for a while, I just don't work, I don't write, read, or even talk to my family. I cannot even play. So what I do is just go to the garden, calm myself down, and when I feel attached to reality again, I come back and work.